Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice for Radio. So today, we've got more Pokemon V to talk about. We've got Inteleon V. Inteleon V is coming. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I like Inteleon. I'm not 100% sure about Inteleon V. Let me explain, shall we? Now, this is coming out in those tins, which we've talked about a couple of times recently, coming out in February. And we got a 200 HP Pokemon V, which is honestly, like, right in the middle. Generally speaking, we've got the lower end, think things like Celebi V. And then we've got the higher end, think at 180, think things like Zamazenta with 230, but really that's an outlier. Generally, we're expecting between 180 and 220, and oh, look, this is exactly halfway between. You have got a retreat cost of 2, which means if you want free retreat, you'll have to use Balloon, but having said that, we have Balloon, so that's nice. You have got a weakness to Lightning. Water Pokemon have changed their weakness to Lightning, and I'll be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not chuffed about this. Because Morpeko V is proving itself to be one of the best decks in the format, more on that tomorrow, and frankly, I don't like having the weakness to Morpeko V. It makes me a little bit sad, and it makes me a little bit nervous. Being a water Pokemon means you've got access to... Well, we've lost most of our good tricks. I want to be saying stuff like Aqua Patch and Brooklet Hill, but they rotated out. So now we're stuck with Crash Awake, which is fun, but nobody really plays it. Discard 2 Water Energy, search for any 2 cards. We do have the combination of Naganadel and Quagsire to accelerate energy. And to be fair, we do also then hit for weakness on Fire Pokemon, which with Welder running around is kind of a big deal. Oh yeah, and you're a basic. All Pokemon Vs are basic. Cool. So what does it do? No translation needed. We have an English image. Shout out to the lovely Matthew Varive at Immunity for hooking us up. Lovely, lovely dude. 1 Water Energy. This attack does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. It's alright. I want it to be 60. And if you've watched a bunch of my videos, you'll probably know by now, I am a big fan of doing 60 to the bench. And anytime we're not doing 60 to the bench, I generally complain that I want to be doing 60 to the bench. Now, yes, I know your opponent can always play the Mew from Unbroken Bonds to protect their bench. If they do, they do. Similarly, they can play Sky Pillar. Now, to be fair, if they play Sky Pillar, you can replace the stadium and then hit the bench. But hey-ho. Point is, I want it to be 60 for stuff like Inkay. Evolving Pokemon generally have 60 like Inkay, or maybe 70 like Poipole, and being able to hit them off the bench would be great. Being able to take out 1 or 2 of your opponent's evolving Pokemon would really pay for this Pokemon. Remember, it's a Pokemon V. When it goes down, it gives up 2 prizes. If I've done a bit of damage to 2 of my opponent's bench Pokemon and given up 2 prizes, I'm probably not feeling like I've got enough value from Inteleon V here. If, however, I have taken out 2 evolving Pokemon, taken 2 prizes, and hampered my opponent's setup by taking away 2 of their evolving Pokemon, I'm probably going to start feeling like, you know what? I have gotten value out of this. I'm feeling okay. Now, of course, the one thing this is wonderful for is Ditto Prism Star. This is great against Ditto Prism Star. Ditto Prism Star has 40 HP, so you come in and just take out Ditto Prism Star from the bench. Brilliant. And if your opponent is playing Ditto but isn't playing Mew, essentially anytime they put down Ditto Prism Star's going away. Outside of that, you're just not getting very much. Now, Sinistea, I do like because Poltegeist looks very good, and that has 30 HP. I'll link that video in the description. I'm a fan of Poltegeist. Frostmoth is looking really good, and that's kind of weak, but even Snom, and I love me some Snom, 50 HP. You're not getting enough Pokemon here. You're just not. And that's my biggest issue. I like the single energy hit the bench, try taking out basics, but I don't like that it's only 40 damage. I don't think 40 damage is enough. But luckily we do have a second attack here. 2 water, 1 colourless energy, 130 damage. Your opponent reveals their hand. It's a bit of a weird one, and I'm not sure how good it really is. I mean, being able to look at your opponent's hand is fun, but if you're really desperate to look at your opponent's hand, Lavender Town. We've got a stadium at the moment, it's Lavender Town, and it lets you, once during your turn, look at your opponent's hand. Now, I suppose once during their turn they get to look at your hand, but looking at your opponent's hand at the end of the turn doesn't really help you. I mean, you look at your opponent's hand and then they play a Cynthia, well, they've now got a different hand. So the information that you've got is out of date. It might not be terribly useful, and that's my issue here. You can look at your opponent's hand, but generally speaking, you look at your opponent's hand and you go, ha ha ha, now I know what you're planning, except it's the end of your turn. So it doesn't matter what your opponent is planning. And to be honest with you, you're probably about to see what your opponent is planning anyway, because they're gonna do it. Looking at your opponent's hand can be extremely good. Let's take Sinisty. Well, Poltergeist that evolves into. The one I mentioned earlier. Really good attack, 1 psychic, 1 colourless energy. Your opponent reveals their hand. This attack does 50 damage for each trainer card your opponent has in their hand. It is in fact the same attack as we see on Gengar and Mimikyu, except it's on a Pokemon that gives up 1 prize rather than 3, but also only has 60 HP and evolves from a terribly weak Pokemon. But what I'm getting at here is that this is an attack where you want to look at your opponent's hand. And what is in your opponent's hand will be extremely relevant moving forward. If you look at your opponent's hand, you know whether you're getting a KO or not. So that might then influence your decision to use something like Reset Stamp, for instance. You play Reset Stamp, your opponent gets a new hand, they shuffle the hand into their deck, and draw new cards, and they get a new hand equal to the number of prize cards they've got remaining. Or the same thing with Peking Red Card, where you get to look at their hand first, and then you can make them shuffle in or not, and they get a new hand the same size as the hand they're shuffling in. But the thing is, you get to look. So let's say, for argument's sake, you are terrified of your opponent using a double custom catcher to win the game. You know that if your opponent hits 2 custom catcher, they win the game. Well, you look at their hand, and then if they've got double custom catcher, then you play something like Reset Stamp to slow them down. Whereas here, you use Inteleon's attack, you look at your opponent's hand and go, oh, you got double custom catcher there. And then it's the end of your turn. And then your opponent plays a double custom catcher. You get valuable information, but by the time you get the information, it's too late to use the information. Now compare this to, for instance, the Inteleon from the V-Dex. And the Inteleon from the V-Dex is a lot more fun in this regard, because it's actually a cheaper attack as well. For 1 energy, you do 40 damage, and you discard a random card from your opponent's hand. And okay, it's a random card, but at least then there's some disruption. You don't get to look at your opponent's hand, but you might get to discard something useful. I'm liking the way that Inteleon is being made in the trading card game as a disruption Pokemon, but I don't know how disruptive this really is. As a side note, how good is the Inteleon from the set? It's got the amazing ability that lets you search for 2 trainer cards when you evolve up. So good. And 120 to the active, 20 to one of your opponent's bench. So again, we've got bench hitting here. So disruption, bench hitting, trickery. We're actually seeing a bit of an identity being made for Inteleon already. Now, in terms of the damage, you do 130, and I will say that 130 is the number. 120 is annoying, 130 is a significantly better number. It means that you are getting a 1-hit KO on those 130 HP Pokemon. Things like Buzzwole, for instance. The thing is, one of the things you really want to be hitting for weakness here is Reshiram and Charizard. And Reshiram and Charizard's got 270 HP. Which means with weakness, you hit 130, it doubles up to 260 and you're 10 damage short. And sure, you can use something like a Vitality Band to do that extra 10 damage, but my point is, I don't want to have to play a Vitality Band to get a one-hit KO on a Reshiram and Charizard when I'm hitting for weakness and I've got free energy on a 2-prize Pokemon. That doesn't seem terribly fair. I don't think it does enough. I don't think your opponent revealing their hand does all that much, because you get to see what they're going to do, but it's too late to do anything about it. Looking at your opponent's hand is great when you've got time to respond. And I don't think 130 for free energy on a GX is good enough. Well, it's a V, but 2-prize basic Pokemon. You know what I mean? Free energy, we expect more. I mean, Boswell GX for free energy did 160, and that was years ago at this stage. I don't know. It just seems slightly underwhelming. In terms of the energy, don't forget you've got Quagsire and Naganadel. Quagsire attaches to itself. Naganadel moves it to the active. So the energy shouldn't worry you here. It just doesn't do enough damage, and looking at your opponent's hand isn't particularly useful at the end of your turn. And don't get me wrong, it's better than just flat 130. It is quite literally better than nothing. But we've got a stadium that just does this way better. I still like the first attack, but the problem is the games in which the first attack is going to be super useful are probably not going to be numerous enough to warrant playing it just for the first attack. But remember, we are expecting a VMAX of Inteleon. We did see that on VMAX Rising, the booster pack image. So, even though I don't think it's a particularly great card now, there is every possibility we get a really good Inteleon VMAX, and we have to play this to play that. For now, I'm giving it between 2 and 3 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies, that would be barbaric. I love Inteleon as a Pokemon. Sobble was my boy all the way through Pokemon Sword, and I like some of the other Inteleon cards, but I think this is underwhelming. Not bad per se, just not really good enough for the investment needed. But I'd like to know what you think, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice, and then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon but do have awesome. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.